Okay, so is that, were there any doubts on this? Its repetition is more like a summarization of what we did in terms of how to go about the day-to-day selling, right? Is it, you put that there? Okay. So now, coming to the negotiation, we said how to close the deal. We have talked about selling the solution, making the customer buy your solution. When you make an offer, you make it with multiple components, right? You understand? It's not, you're not selling one item. You're selling an item plus several other things, right? And those plus items, you have to create those components. You can't go with one item and say buy this. You'll have to say either it's a pack of service into that, or you pack some, some transportation cost into that, or insurance, or you can have various components. Okay. How do you decide those components? You don't know what is the value to, there is a certain cost. Each time you add some component into your offer, you're adding cost to it. Your basic product plus will add the cost of the product. Okay, so you're going to pitch it there and you're going to quote that price, highest price. In many of these items that you padded your offer with may be of high value to the customer, it may be of low cost to you. There may be also those which are low value to the customer and high cost to you. That's how it will be. There will be something you're doing which is of no value to the customer, but there are small things that you can do which will mean a big thing to him, right? Both of them should be in your offer. You know which is which because you understood the customer very well. Okay, now what you're going to do is you start dropping the high cost components. When you're negotiating, drop the high cost components. Then you're really giving the customers, you're dropping something which is of low value to him, whatever, but high cost to you, it's okay. So you're moving. But progressively you'll have to start making your concessions smaller and smaller. You understand? Suppose you're dropping 10%, then you're dropping 5%, then you're dropping 3%, then you're dropping 1%, half percent. You're basically giving him a signal that you can't go beyond this. Don't do randomly. Don't suddenly drop the price and then, get caught with, because he will have an expectation. The moment you start negotiating price, they start gauging where are you coming from. What do you think? He'll start guessing where your bottom line is. You give him an indication wherever the bottom. He knows that somewhere it's not going to go below that. If it's going in a straight line, he will have high expectation that you will keep dropping. That's the only point I wanted to make. You make your concessions small and progressively smaller. It's almost a logarithmic scale. Okay? And sometimes you may have to walk away. It's best to walk away if you find that there is no deal. He may call you if he needs, but if he's not interested in buying, don't waste your time. And keep something. At the end of the sale, it's always the good feelings that the customer has at the end of the buying process that is going to last forever. That's a relationship. Keep something so that at the end of the sale you can, the sweetener, give it to him. These are small techniques that we have used and I'm just sharing this. A sweetener is, some people may throw some spares. Suppose he's selling a machine, he may say, essential spares, I'm just giving 1 year's stock of spares. It's already factored in the price, it's not that. Or they may say, warranty for another year. 1 year warranty, 1 more year. These are things that you know that will not cost you. Your robot, you can say, it lasts for 3 years. You will say 1 year, you keep on fighting. Then you say, okay, keep another year. After everything is signed, then you're throwing something, he will value that. It may be something small. It may be that you can say, I'll give you credit terms, 60 days payment, I'll make it 90 days. Be careful on that. I mean, that's not the right thing to do. But if you feel the customer he's a sure guy, he's a customer who will pay certainly, a good, well-known name, but he has a cash crisis or something. Or you can open a, letter of credit or something through a bank. So there are various ways in which we can add some small sweetener to the contract. Now let me talk about customer perception of value. When you're talking about pricing, do you understand what this means? Aircraft maintenance time, door to door versus wing to wing. Any guesses? It's not a very common statement that is made, but this is very famous. General Electric, GE, was in the business of aircraft engine maintenance. Okay. So they used to repair aircraft engines, and they will charge the Airbus or Boeing or whoever it is for the repair of the engines. So their billing started from the time the aircraft entered their workshop door. The engine entered their workshop door. And the repair would be done, and the engine will come out to the door again. After that is the airline which has to take care of the engine and fix it and run it. So that is called door to door. That is door to door, incoming. They changed. They said the value for the customer is how long the aircraft is down. It is not how long the engine is in my workshop. So they said, okay, we will charge you a little more, maybe a lot more, not little more. For the aircraft, the time on the ground is maybe millions of dollars. So GE went and said, we will do wing to wing. That means if your aircraft is down, I will take it from the wing and I'll fix it back on the wing. Okay, and that time is what I will bill you for, and that time will be minimized. So it's a service. So the value for the customer is very high. Okay, so you understand the value, so you can play the value game and charge a lot of money. Similarly, electrical cables. This is a very, very mundane product in any project. Electrical cable is the most common item anybody will use in any project. And a guy who's selling electrical cables, how can he make more money? Because if you go to a project management PMC and say, I want to sell cables to you, the purchase guy will talk to you and he say, okay, I have 3 quotations, L1. The least quotation is what I will buy. I don't want to waste money on cables. But what this company realized is that time for a project is very, very important. Completion time of a project. Okay, and any delay in the time can mean huge amount of losses. And they found that one of the main reasons for delay is the cables are not connecting on time. Electrical work, I've also taken some projects recently. I know electrical work is what delays most of the projects, because it's till the last minute something is going on. So this cable company said, I will charge you 20% more, but I will give you on time and your project will finish on time. Okay, so this is not an empty statement. They said in case there is a delay by even a day or hour or something, it's free. The cable is free, or maybe 50% off or something, which actually means that the company is very, very confident about their delivery schedule. One, because there's 20% extra that they are making on every sale, they can afford to do a lot of, take actions to ensure they are just in time. And the probability of it being free or sold at 50% is negligible. So they can actually go and make that offer. It's called a mafia offer. That's what we call a mafia offer. It's an irrefusable offer. If you go and tell a company that, I will give you free if I'm delayed, and you don't go to the purchase manager, you go to the project manager who's in charge of timely completion, and you go and pitch it to him and say, look, you buy cables from me, your project will finish on time. And you will save X amount of rupees, because every delay counts. Okay? All you have to do is, pay me 20% more, tell your purchase guy. And how will he convince the purchase guy? He will say, fine, 20% more is okay. I'm the project manager, I will take care of the overall cost. But if there's any delay, it's free. Similarly, you will find that there are a lot of hidden costs the customers are facing. Okay? Asset maintenance cost was there. There's a cost that you don't know. Inventory carrying. There may be so many. These are some examples that I put. Obsolescence, stockouts. So we do inventory, what do you call vendor managed inventory. Stuff like that. So you are saying you don't have to keep any stocks. When Toyota was making cars, the seats of the cars used to come in a conveyor into the assembly line from the supplier. So there's no inventory. So when you do this, suddenly the customer's costs just disappear. He doesn't need warehouses, he doesn't need people, he doesn't need any inventory management system. He says, you just supply, that's it. And one at a time. So these are ways in which you can charge more money. At the same time, you can keep competition out. Okay. Now I just want to spend a few minutes on go to market. I think we have some time, right? This is a business model canvas. This will be touched upon later, but I think what we are looking at is the right hand side of the business model canvas. We have a value proposition which we discussed. What is value to the customer? We talked about segmentation, right? We talk about the channels. Channels are how your product is going to reach the customer. How is it going to reach? And relationships are how is it going to be? How are you going to maintain a relationship? Essentially, how will you interface? So there are customers who want to buy in a certain way. This is very important. In a B2B selling, we should know how the customer buys. And they have a certain rhythm, they have a certain method of buying, they have certain protocol, and we should get into that effortlessly. Then it will go. If you make him change his system, you will have. So how does your customer want to receive it? How do you want to reach? One is we may have a certain way of approaching, but the customer has a certain way. Both are important. Similarly, what does a channel do? If you're using a channel to sell, you may want to use a channel. It creates awareness. It helps customers evaluate. Customers can buy from a channel. Okay, and it delivers your value. If you're selling through a channel, then a channel is important for you that he represents you correctly. It may happen when your customer size becomes very large, even if it's B2B, you may still want to ride on a channel. A channel is a middle person who will take your product, sell it, service it, promote it. So it is important to decide early in the day whether you would want a channel. Would you want a service, after sales service to be done by you? Suppose you're selling buses. Do you want to service those buses tomorrow, or you want to tie up with somebody? Right? So that's what this is asking you to do now. When you come to relationships, it really talks about how do you get, keep and grow. Get, keep and grow. Okay? How do you get customers? Advertising. Earned and paid media. What is earned and paid? What's the difference between earned and paid media? If you have a news article about your product, that's earned media. You don't have to pay for it. You just appeared in a TV news suddenly. Paid media is what you pay. So you're continuously, what are you doing? You're trying to create awareness to the customers. When you meet the customers, when you ask them questions in the interview process, you try to find out how do they come to know about new products. Do they search the net? Do they attend conferences? Do they visit, buy some journals, industry reference journals? What is the way that they come to know something new? Suppose the robot. How does a customer in the water pipeline industry know there is some new technology available? So you have to be there. You have to participate in that, and then you create an awareness. Awareness means as long as the media is playing, he is becoming aware. Interest is when the media has stopped, he's still thinking about it. He's seen the ad yesterday, today he's thinking about it. That means he's got interest. Consideration is he's now making a call to you. He's saying, okay, the other day I saw something, or you met me. That's consideration. And then it goes to a purchase. Now to pass these 4 steps, there is a cost. It's not free. And from purchase, you can create. Somebody purchases, he can give you some leads. So there is an awareness from there. Okay. Now, how to keep customer? Once he's bought from you, how are you going to retain him? There are various ways in which loyalty programs of product updates, satisfaction surveys. Just call and say, you use my product, how do you like it? Simple follow-up calls, right? Then you grow. So this is maintaining a customer. Unbundling. Today, mobile phones are unbundled. They break it up and say you can buy, just calls or 100 messages or whatever. Unbundle and break it up. Upselling is sell the next version of it. Cross-selling is sell 2 different complementary products. If you're selling a bus, you're selling something else with it. Let's say, I don't know, complementary product. Right? Referrals is very important. At this stage, the customer is very happy with you. And if he gives you referrals, he's your salesman. So this is very, very important to get referrals from, because satisfied customer is always, if he's willing to refer you to somebody else, that means he is happy. And if he refers and you go to that other person, he will definitely be very favorably disposed. Okay. So this is called customer acquisition cost, and this is called lifetime value. Okay, now how to calculate this customer acquisition cost is simply, I mean, it's arithmetic. If you're saying the cost of my media is X and I'm getting Y customers, X by Y, that's what this does. Number of visitors, number of leads, number of customers you get. This is important, very, very important to calculate this. Because there have been many startups which have failed because they have not calculated the customer acquisition cost and they burnt money. Because you waiting for the first sale or the second sale or the third sale, and you're going to burn money, a lot of money here. It's good to estimate and use the cheapest kind of medium or something which maximizes your reach. If you're attending conferences of physios, that will be a psychologist, that may be a better way of reaching out. How do you minimize this cost? And how do you reach out to usually there is some ratio here. I mean, if you look at this, you can say 1:10. For every 10 people, one person may have interest. Maybe out of 10 here, one will see consideration. So he'll go down by a factor of 10. So unless you have 1,000 people, you may not get a single customer. Maybe, or 2 or 3 customers. So the ratio diminishes rapidly. So how do you make this cost minimum and yet reach maximum people? You can think of all kinds of viral marketing. So these will be very important in your go-to market.
Typically, to any customer online channel, the regression rate is like 10% or 1% of how much is. I mean, if we are considering like 1%, like 100 is the total set. Out of that, the purchase happens 1 or?
Online will be less than 1 or around 1%. Online. That is the purchase. From awareness to purchase, it will be even less than 1%. Awareness, everybody gets aware.
Every layer is like 10%.
I'm saying approximately. Some place, we don't know. The actual data may be slightly plus minus, but there will be an order of magnitude of 10. It may be 9 or 8 or whatever, but you can expect a steep drop. It depends on the nature of the product. If you're selling something which is revolutionary, it may pick up. Okay. So, I think broadly, I don't want to repeat some of the things. Already we have covered most of this. I just want to share 2 examples of successful companies. One is called Chai Point. How many of you have heard of Chai Point? Heard of it? Okay, you have heard of it. It is just tea. They are just selling tea. It's an existing market. Okay. What of their value proposition is authentically brewed and served in contemporary environment. That means their outlets are contemporary, latest, most fashionable outlets, let's say, for selling tea. And they're saying authentically brewed. That means they're saying this tea is, Darjeeling is Darjeeling, whatever, very authentic. Consistent taste. So when you go there, you get the consistent taste. So this is their promise they are making to their customers. Who's the customer? Affluent, person who can afford to buy and who cares about his tea, and discerning tea, a person who knows the different tastes of tea, etc. So they have chosen their customer and said, for this customer, I will give this value proposition. Then they have another segment which is a busy office goer. That means the person who is working in an office like this complex, and he wants to have a cup, he wants to take a break and have a cup of tea. Brighten your day with a perfect cup. Now that cup of tea today in the vending machine, very few people like it. It's not the best of quality of teas. The market size is huge. Tea. But still they went about interviewing prospect before venturing out. So literally they said, do my customers want this value proposition or not? If you don't do this, you may think there's a 20,000 crore market, you may not get anywhere. Okay. How do they connect? They use e-commerce websites and they had their own retail outlet. They didn't have any franchisee. They wanted authentic. So I can't give it to a franchisee. It has to be my own outlet. And e-commerce is a very low cost way of reaching out. Institutions, they did operation and maintenance of tea dispensers. They went themselves and said, we will install, we will maintain. Okay. and they directly supplied everything. So it is a complete solution, is their channel. How do they deliver the value proposition? Sourcing tea from exclusive estate. This is something the company went and out of the way to say, I am going to tie up a tea estate and I'll buy specific tea and specific quality. This is taken care of. They had an academy for training employees. It's almost like Indigo training air hostesses or pilots. For serving tea and making tea, they actually created an academy for training employees. Why? So that the experience of customer all over the country, wherever they open, is identical. They've talked about for how home delivery, you can even order at home and you get a hot cup of tea at home because it takes about 60 minutes to deliver the cup of tea. Okay. What did they do? They had special packaging which retains heat for 60 minutes and it's eco-friendly packaging. It's not plastic which will spoil the environment. Again, authentic. They had EV, electric scooters to deliver, not petrol. Okay. So the whole thing is saying, look, this is my value proposition, this is my customer, this is what he values. I don't have to do this. Even without this, I can sell tea. Without the electric scooters, I can sell tea. Without, I can put it in a plastic container and send it. They spent money, they trained people. This institutional pack had artificial intelligence, IoT. The advantage of this is they could maintain every cup identical taste. And they also knew when the level was coming down, the tea level or water level replacement, so it made their job easy. So it doesn't mean if you're adding technology, cost is going to increase, actually reduce cost. Because the wastage is less, your quality is improved, so you go back and see the value proposition, how they have consistent taste, authentically brewed. The entire thing has been taken care of by, so apart from the value proposition, the channels and the relationship that you maintain with the customer is very, very important. That is what I wanted to say here. Look at Swiggy. This is the second, all of you know Swiggy, right? What is their value proposition? No minimum order quantity. You can order one gulab jamun or whatever. Initially, the customer segment was 20, 30-year-old. College student, working professional, e-commerce savvy, you should be able to operate an app, living away from home. This is what they targeted initially. What did they do? No minimum order, live order tracking, lightning fast delivery. They have only 5-kilometer radius where they will serve. So it's fast delivery. So this is the promise. What is the offer for the restaurants? Cost of serving is greater than commission paid. They're paying commission to Swiggy. But if they don't pay the commission to Swiggy, they lose the business. Or if the person comes to the restaurant and starts eating there, the cost of serving that guy in the restaurant is more than the commission. So that's a value proposition for the restaurant and the kitchens. And they have wider access to customers. Obviously, a restaurant can sell twice or thrice more. Something like what you're trying to do. You're increasing the throughput, right? This is one way they have solved it. So they have a policy, no minimum order, to execute their value proposition. They have their own fleet, 20,000 delivery boys, now it must be more. Limited to neighborhood outlets. Mobile app with only 2 touch points. You have only 2 touch points. Okay? When you order, and when the guy comes and knocks on your door and delivers the food, that's all. You don't have anything else. So that's convenience. They started with the 8% margins. Today they are commanding 25% with the restaurant. So basically they've gone very successful with this model. Okay. So these are various ways in which they have acquired customers, giving offers, gift vouchers, connecting with various movie halls, book my show. These are various ways. Depending on your product, you could link up. Today the opportunities are many to connect. Partnered in Mobi. Okay, now what they did, they partnered with a company which was having mobile data. Help Swiggy target upscale residences. So you can target, today you can pinpoint customers because data is available. And those data are available at a price. Though there is data privacy issues, but available data is there. So it has helped them increase their install of their apps and lower cost. So I said customer acquisition cost. if you do it intelligently, you can increase, because you've gone through data savvy people. You need to identify these people. Who are the upscale resident dwellers? Who are the millennials? Where are they staying? What are their phone numbers? Who are the shopping and how do you find out these people globally? So InMobi is the company which has all that data. So that has saved them lower cost per user acquired. How do they keep? Now they've started promoting in corporate schools, housing societies, etc. They have a van, gives discounts, vlogging or video logging. So there are various contests, various ways in which you keep customers engaged. Okay, they listen to customers. Even after doing well, they listen. Customers' locality did not have many good restaurants. There was a problem. Felt guilty about eating restaurant food many times, wanted home style meals. This was some feedback. Did not want to spend 300, 400 rupees for every meal. This is some feedback they got. So what did they do? They launched a cloud kitchen model. Access to solve the first two issues. So cloud kitchen means you don't have a good restaurant in your locality, you will get it from here. A home style food. In-house brands, they have their own brands. Also let customers order from slightly far off at an additional fee. So there are various ways in which you can handle some dissatisfied customers. They are now moving into food and pharma and electronics and grocery. So you see, once you have a customer with you, you are trying to add cross-selling, getting lifetime value from the customer. So these are some of the ways in which a company like this is adding more and more products and features into their relationship and product offering. Okay, so I think that brings me to the end of this session. Thanks for listening patiently, and if you have any questions, I'm sorry my voice wasn't the best today. Tell me if there are any residual questions, we can take it up. Or if you find it, yeah.
Schedule a call with the customer
Yeah.
for selling a product. We have to disclose our details, right? I'm from a company called Solinas.
Yeah.
So the call may be scheduled for a few days later, and meanwhile he'll have a time to inquire about me. Like maybe he'll Google my company's name and he finds that.
No, you're going to tell him the truth. No. You're going to tell him the truth, right? About yourself?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So when he opens my company website, he will know what I'm actually doing.
Okay.
So when I go and try to meet him, he will try to make objections. As you said, when he knows about your product, he'll try to object for whatever thing I'm going to tell him, right?
Has it happened to you? Or are you just imagining this?
It's my doubt.
It's your doubt. It's not happened.
No, not yet.
See, one is, if a person is Googling your company, he is interested. Otherwise, he won't Google. Okay. So when he starts objecting, you can ask him, how did you know about me? He has to tell you, I Googled you. See, the thing is, you must quickly get onto a questioning mode with the customer. Buyers are very smart. They are seasoned buyers. You people may be fresh and young. But you have to quickly start into questioning mode and say, how did you know about me? Okay, what made you look into this thing? What is the problem you are trying to solve? You must do that. So it's an opportunity is presenting to you. You see it as a problem that this guy is objecting. But it's an opportunity presented to you saying he knows about you. Oh, you know so much about me. I'm very happy to know that. How did you know? Quickly, even if you're answering a question, at the end of the answer, put a question back. You must do this. Otherwise, when you're asking questions, you are in control of the conversation. If you're answering questions, if a lawyer asks questions, you know who's in control. You will be cross-examined. Okay, at the same time, don't make the customer feel cross-examined, but get into conversation pleasantly.
I think it comes with practice.
It will come with practice, but be conscious of it. I'm saying prepare and go. That's why I put that call sheet. You write down the questions you want to ask, but don't stick to the script. The danger is if you prepare and go, you will only ask those questions. But it's an art you can develop. The moment he says something, you must put it back and say, okay, so what? Why? Ask why. Why is a very interesting question to ask. Why do you say this? If he gives an answer, again ask why. 5 whys if you ask, you will know what is the root cause. And that is how the customer also realizes, because many times people say something without realizing in deep inside what it is. But if you ask them why, you'll make them realize. Then they'll say, thanks for pointing it out. I think I have this problem. Then you got him. You must make him articulate his problem and articulate that he is suffering from that problem and he is looking for a solution. If he is not, then he is not your customer. Don't need to waste your time. Okay.
Can you say what the objection was?
No, when the customer gauges that you're going to sell something to him, he will make objections, right? He will stop listening to you.
No, it is his apprehension. It has not
Apprehension,
happened. It is his apprehension that because what we said is, if you start talking about your features, the customer will object because he is saying you're selling him something which he doesn't want. But here you are assuming the customer will go visit your website, know your features and come and object. It's unlikely.
yeah.
If at all he has done that, he is interested in your product, which is a valuable clue.
Our product is an organic fertilizer.
Yeah.
We talk to farmers and our basic USP is we are technologically upgraded in that product. So organic fertilizers do not have the capability to preserve cells for a really long time. So we have been able to do that. Now, considering a farmer, it's difficult to explain that there is a cell count with the bacteria, there is a viability. If you increase the cell number, then
No, you
Yeah.
have to talk to the farmer about his problem. What is the farmer's problem today?
so he has. So when we go usually talk to a farmer about fertilizers, he brings up questions about pesticides and insecticides, which is also a major problem. But he does not realize that it is interrelated to the chemical fertilizer use. So when you use chemical fertilizers,
No, I understand what you're saying. What is the problem the farmer is facing because of the chemical fertilizer? What is the problem?
So his plants basically become, though they look like a higher yield, but they're basically weaker plants with the forced.
All that is fine.
Yeah.
What is the problem for the farmer? Does he lose money?
He loses yield on a
He loses yield.
long-term basis. Yeah, and he does not see that because it's because of the chemical fertilizers.
He is losing yield on a long term.
On a long-term basis, and also there are more pest and infections, pest infestations and infections because he's using.
So he is losing.
Yeah.
So is he aware that he is losing?
He
You
is
have to
aware
make him
that
aware.
He is losing, but he's not aware that he is losing because of this. Because of chemical fertilizers. He always sees that it is because of pesticides and insecticides. So I have infections, I have pests coming in. What chemicals do I put in to stop that? So how do we explain it to him?
So you are
that
saying if because he is using some particular chemical, pests are coming today. With
Yeah,
organic
so
fertilizer,
slowly-
pests will not come.
Yeah, so basically what happens with organic fertilizers, it makes the plant grow naturally more healthier and immune to a lot of pests and insects
Is
and
it?
infections as well. So when they use chemical fertilizers,
So
for
then if you tell him
Yeah.
that you are suffering from pests today, what would you like to do to see that no pests are coming to your plant? His problem is pests are coming to the plant
Yeah.
and eating up the right. So so that is his problem. So what is the implication of that? He is losing money. How much money is he losing? That you can ask him. What is his income and how much he would have made had the pest not affected his plants? He would have made more money. So there is a pain that he is facing. That's the implication of the pest coming.
right.
Then you tell him if there was a solution which will prevent the pest from attacking your plant, would you like it? Now his suggestion is that don't use pesticides or something, is it? What is that? He says?
No, he does not want to change his fertilizer thing, but that is where
No, therefore, why does he not want to change his fertilizer? Because he believes fertilizer does some good.
Yeah.
Okay. At the same time, it is attracting pests. What you have to tell him is, yes, your fertilizer you're using for purpose of growth of the plant or giving a better yield. Suppose there is some product or chemical where you can get the yield as well as it will not give you attract pests. What do you think? Is that what he wants? He wants to use some chemical. Don't call it fertilizer. Call it some chemical, or call it fertilizer. You say, "I'll give you a fertilizer," or don't even say, "I'll give you." If you are able to source a fertilizer, which will do the job and will also prevent pests from attacking, do you think it is worth it? How much more money you will make if you have such a fertilizer? You have got an idea by then. If he's using 20%, 30% of his crop because of this, then, and if he says I'm making X lakhs rupees in a year, then you know that some money is sitting there, being wasted every year because of pest attack. You got a hang of it. Now you tell him, would you like to, do something about it, because and if there is a solution, would you buy it? How much will you pay for that? You can ask him. Suppose it costs more money than what you're paying, will you still buy it? You're gauging the value that you're going to offer to him. He will say, I'm saving 20%, I will be willing to pay 10%. He might even say that. Then you can say, here's the product. Am I getting? This is what.
We have currently been running on educating the farmer that these are the things that go on.
If they are listening to you, it's fine when you're trying to educate them. But if they are not listening to you, what you told me is that they don't seem to believe what you're saying. Right?
Yeah.
So you have to make
and
him.
The product sort of solves 2-3 problems at the same time because of the main invention.
So you have to make the farmer say it. When you're educating, you're teaching him something, and he is objecting. In his mind, he is resisting. Probably, I don't know. Right? He doesn't want to be taken for a ride. Some people may feel that way. But if you put it across in such a way that ask him questions. How much are you suffering today? What is the reason you think? Hear him out. Let him empty out all his concerns. At the end of it, you say, if there was a solution which will not have this bad effect but only have the good effect, would you be interested? Then you're making him articulate the solution that you want. The benefit that you want to sell, he's articulating. That's what that audio said. If he says it, it's true. If you say it, it's a lie. So you're trying to teach him. He's telling, I know all salespeople make some talk. Let him say it. You're not threatening him at all and saying, I don't want to sell anything. I just want you to understand that this is a problem you're facing, and if there's a solution like this, would you be interested? You have to do it cash. I mean, there is a art of doing this, but you will develop once you meet the guy and talk to him. Don't try to sell. See if it solves the problem, and does he want it to solve the problem. If he's not bothered about the problem, he will not buy. Like that water leakage, he will not buy. 50% leak is fine. He should see the problem, he should feel the problem, and he should know the implication of the problem is a lot of money. And then you tell him if there is something which will solve that problem, will you take it? The full cycle is closed. Yeah.
How do you deal with a recommender who is also a saboteur?
Recommender is a sabotager.
So there is a B2B. So one person sees the other person as a recommender, but that the other person. So
Why would he sabotage? I mean, if the product is good,
yes.
we need to understand why would you think he is a sabotager. Is there any ulterior motive, or is there a lack of clarity in who's this person? I mean, what is this role that he is doing?
So basically, there is a B2B. So there is only one single point of contact. So there is a company which is approaching another person, and this person is supposed to recommend this product to the other company. He's having a lot of convictions, and he has some ulterior motives, say. So how do we tackle that? So there's only one single point of contact. Like we can't go to the superior and we cannot knock him off or something like that. So how do we deal with that?
One is to use logic. His logic works. Is he saying even if it's a better product I won't buy? Is that what he's saying? You have to make him say some things. Obviously you need to have a dialogue with that person, and at some point of time he has to say why he is not recommending it. What is the reason he gives for not recommending?
Usually the conversation goes like he knows that he is in charge.
No,
or-
I know,
Yeah,
that may be. Is he saying I'm in charge so I will not? What is he saying? If you ask him why are you not recommending this product, what is his response? Does he say it doesn't meet the qualifications? If he says that, then he is talking facts. Then you have to take the fact and say, maybe what you said is right, now I've got a product improved, here it meets the specs. You need corner him to say why he is not recommending. Or if he is not wanting to meet you, then you can go higher up and say, look, I'm not getting a meeting with this person, can you arrange a meeting? You don't suspect anything unnecessarily. Go straight forward and say, please tell me why you're not recommending my product.
This guy a little more kind of.
It may, but you've given him enough opportunity. I'm not saying you go straight away. You give him, you try to meet him 2 times, 3 times, whatever. Meet him outside office hours. I mean, there are various ways informally you could try to meet him. We tried to meet people those days. Only Indian Airlines was the airline. We had to meet the chairman of NDTB. So only way to meet him is put off his secretary, find out when he is catching a flight to Delhi, book a seat next to them. Did that. So sometimes you have to do some devious, because as an entrepreneur, you can't give up. You have to find a way. And if he's not meeting you, then you have to, if he's not meeting you 10 times, you go directly and then you go up. Or you go down also. Somebody, junior fellow will know more about him. He may be expecting something from you which he is not telling you. But through somebody else, the message will come to you. He may not tell you directly. But how do you deal with that message is then up to you. Ideally, better not to tread the straight path, you are safe. Don't fall for any, because tomorrow that person may not be in the seat. I don't know if he's a bureaucrat. They may also get transferred. So there are, sometimes you have to wait for your opportunity. Some new person comes, you will get the chance. Or you directly ask him, I'm willing to, share all the data with you. What is it you want? You are facing problem, I think. In government is difficult to deal. If you're trying to, that is B2G, this is B2B we are talking about. When you're trying to deal with governments, it's very, very tricky and it's a very slow process.
Very slow. How long can you actually?
It may take years, it may take a year and you will need a lot of people who know the government machinery inside out. You have to go through them. You need a channel.
Do you have any access?
For me, directly, I can find out. I don't have direct access. But depends on what kind of people you're looking for. But government actually is not easy to do business with if you're a startup. Our suggestion would be take some private sector, do the product. If there are private sector fleet owners who may be interested, they will buy. And then the government may be interested. You go directly to the government, because there nobody owns anything. They are all paid employees. So they will have their own agendas. Nobody, you can go to Mr. Gadkari, but it's difficult for him to execute through the system also. There will be so many other, because you have to take care of, people are there to raise objections easily. And that problem will come back to you and say, now you tell me how to solve this problem. Suppose, what do I do with my existing fleet if somebody asks the question? And if Gadkari asks you, what do you have any suggestion? You have to have an answer. If you say, no, that's your problem, you take my, then it will not work. So the government will be difficult and challenging.
With a patent that I've got registered and a product like this, which 100%, I mean, like in, if you go to the railways, in Bombay suburbs, every day, average 2 people die. In addition to some 650 people getting injured in many other ways over a period of time. So, having all these statistics, is there any way that I can use, like you said, you show them there is a problem and ask them.
You must get the right person. See, in the government, getting the right person is the issue. Who in the government is affected because of 2-3 people dying every day? Who is that individual? And who has the power to do something about it? If you get that person, then he will move. To find that person is the challenge. Is it the railway minister? Is it the local administrator? Who is that? So that's why navigating the government is challenging, but if you do find the right person, you have a good proposition. And you could make a presentation to the government ministry and see what the response is. Have you written to them?
I've been writing left, right and center, nothing is happening, that's the problem.
No, you might need somebody who knows people inside and who can give you the access. But try private sector. Why do you go only with government? My recommendation would be private sector is easier. You start small. We said early adopters. Early adopter may be private sector. There are guys who are driving buses from Chennai to Bangalore every day. Give them double the occupancy. Can you do that? Private entities. Then you get somebody to talk about your product. Otherwise, it's still a concept, I think. Sorry. Are we through? 5:59 on the dot.
Yeah. So, on behalf of the incubation cell, for those who do not know me, I'm Kalyani. I'm from the incubation cell here at IIT Madras. So, thank you, Navin Kumar sir, for coming in today. Covering such a vast topic of B2B marketing from customer segment to closing the deal, giving us small tricks and trades of the, secrets of the trade. And thank you so much, sir, despite your help coming here. So, it's a small.
Hey, I don't. This is not on, yeah? Thank you.
And thank you all for coming in as well. We'll be scheduling a workshop depending on sir's convenience. I'll be sending out a mail to all of you. So thank you for coming.
Can you share the slides as well?
Sure.